of Texas.
The Eyes of Texas have been trained this week on a special group of Aggies. We've been to Nacogdoches County to look at a collection of old Victrolas. We have witnessed the demolition of the last building of Old Camp Logan in Houston. We've been to Comanche County to visit with the fiddling barber, and we've been to Fort Worth to see a born-again church building. We all know people who think all Aggies are special, but there is one group of Aggies considered special by nearly everybody.
The group known as the Ross Volunteers is the oldest student organization at Texas A&M. The men who make up the company travel around the Southwest displaying their skills as a precision drill team, a sharp military unit, and as one of the classiest escort services anywhere. The Ross Volunteers of College Station are even in great demand in University of Texas territory. On this day, the group was preparing to act as escorts at the National Republican Governors Convention in Austin. They arrived at mid-afternoon, and before the night was over, they would be on their way back to College Station. It is all part of being a part of an organization that began in 1887.
Some members of the student body got together and went to the administration to ask if they could form a crack military company, as is quoted by the history. And so that's how it basically became about. Over the years, it evolved a little more. It went through stages, depending on the amount of people, the times itself. In 1948, or right around that time, when Governor Allen Shivers was governor of Texas, he designated them as his official honor guard. And since then, the Ross Volunteers have been the honor guard for the governor of Texas and have performed at a lot of official state functions.
In the beginning, this unit was called the Scott Volunteers in honor of Colonel T.M. Scott, business manager at A&M. In 1891, it became the Ross Volunteers in honor of Lawrence Sullivan Ross, a former Texas Ranger, a former Texas governor, and, at that time, the president of Texas A&M. For a time, the name was changed with every administration at the school, but in the early 1900s, Ross became its permanent name. The name honors a famous Texas soldier and statesman, and the young men who make up the Ross Volunteers are the elite of the Aggie Corps.
It's an honor organization, and you're selected on the basis of the way you've carried yourself, your bearing, your conduct, your grades, participation in the university throughout your time there. And like I say, it's something that when I was a freshman and when people come there, they really strive to get into. It's an honor, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
Short end, tall end. Let's farm it up real quick.
You develop some friendships that you wouldn't have had anywhere else, and that's one thing I'm thankful for is the number of people I've met throughout the Corps and the university because of my membership in the Ross Volunteers.
The Corps at A&M, when you're in the Corps, you belong to a special group of guys. And being in the Ross Volunteers is just another elite special group. It's a tighter group. You're doing things together for a good cause.
Okay, form it up. You're at attention. We're going to go through parade rest, come back to attention, present arms.
Ross Volunteers to me is kind of something extra. It's a chance to get to know 72 other people on a more personal basis. Just teamwork, leadership, doing things together. It's a chance to prove your leadership capabilities. It's a test of leadership also.
There's just an additional camaraderie and experience with friendship, and you work a lot together. That all that work and experiences you get as a part and a member of Ross Volunteers is in addition to everything you gain in the Corps, which is a whole lot in itself.
The trips are fun for the highly trained, highly skilled college men, but the work is as hard on the road as it is in the classroom. It is not an easy life. The limelight never is, but there are never any complaints. It is all part of being a member of that elite Ross Volunteer Corps at Texas A&M.
Prowling around flea markets can get people launched on some strange hobbies. Take the case of Ken Wood. He started out buying old records and old phonographs here and there. He's still collecting now, but he's also repairing old record players in Nacogdoches.
Ken Wood has a big record collection, and he bought most of the recordings at flea markets. He enjoys listening to his records, but Ken has not invested a lot of money in stereo players and expensive speakers. He has done just the opposite. Ken has gone out to those flea markets and bought old-fashioned Victrolas, the kind that you wind up. Ken has never owned an electrically operated phonograph player until a few years ago, and he bought that one for his children and their records. Ken prefers the old wind-up Victrolas.
I like the machines for several reasons. I like the history behind them. I've made a study of Edison and the early history connected with the phonographs. And I like to, of course, the music that goes along with the machines. And it's an interesting study, just to study about the different types of gadgets that they had. The craftsmanship in some of these machines are really fantastic, and you marvel at what people could do with the machinery, the crude machinery that they had back in the late 1800s. Because, see, the phonograph was invented in 1877, and the first record was made out of tinfoil. It was a piece of tinfoil wrapped around a pre-grooved drum, and then from that they went to a cardboard covered with wax, and then they went to a wax, and then they went to celluloid, and then about the turn of the century they came up with the disc phonograph.
The best-known maker of cylinder recordings was the Edison Company. Ken has several Edison cylinder player machines, and he has about 1,500 cylinder recordings.
Cylinders were first recorded for a commercial use started in 1896 and really got going good in 97, 98, 99. About 98 they started working on the disc, and cylinders and discs parallel each other up through about they were still making cylinders into the 20s. To me, the outside horn phonographs have far superior quality.
There have been a lot of technical advances made in phonograph recordings since the recordings in Ken's collection were made, but Ken Wood is not impressed with the improvements.
One of the better city parks in Texas once was an emergency training base for the United States Army. It was Camp Logan during World War I. Now it is Memorial Park on the near west side of Houston.
The site for Camp Logan was selected on the 11th of June, 1917. The United States Army took 2,005 acres for the camp proper and another 2,000 acres for drill grounds and rifle range. Construction work started on the 24th of July the same year. More than 1,000 permanent buildings went up almost simultaneously. There were offices and mess halls and warehouses. There was a YMCA building and there was a YWCA hostess house, but not many barracks. The soldiers here lived in tents, and Camp Logan had the appearance of a big tent city in the trees. The camp was named for Major General John Logan. He was a Union officer in the Civil War. He was also a veteran of the Mexican War and a United States Senator. Logan was once nominated for vice president on the unsuccessful Republican ticket headed by James G. Blaine. The Illinois National Guard unit that trained here served overseas as the U.S. 33rd Division. The trainees started arriving in late July of 1917. There were 8 regiments of infantry and 1 cavalry regiment and 1 artillery regiment. There was also an ambulance and hospital corps. Camp Logan also was the training center for the regular Army's 79th Field Artillery Unit. Picture postcards of the time tell a little about life at the camp, showing how the men trained and washed their own clothes and staged parades in downtown Houston. But most of what people have heard about Camp Logan is not this pleasant. The troops assigned to Camp Logan were black. The 24th Infantry assigned to guard the camp during construction was also black, with white officers. The 24th had a good record, but less than a month after it arrived in Houston, racial tension developed and erupted into violence. When it was over, 16 people were dead. Many more were wounded. 3 courts-martial tried 118 men on charges of mutiny and murder. 29 of them were sentenced to death. 19 of them actually were hanged, and many more got life sentences. The night of August 23rd, 1917 was not a night the United States Army or the city of Houston wanted long to remember. Camp Logan served as a demobilization center at the end of World War I. It was closed in 1919, less than 2 years after it opened. Almost all trace of Camp Logan is gone now. 2 of the camp's original buildings alongside Washington Avenue were used by private businesses until 1979, but they've been demolished now to make way for a new office tower. Part of the area where the camp was is occupied now by private homes and a few small businesses, but most of the area is park. The Army left most of the trees undisturbed. The Hogg family bought the biggest piece of the camp after the Army left and sold it to the city at cost. It looks like it never has been anything but a park. There is not even a marker to show there ever was an Army camp here.
There are fiddling contests at nearly every county fair in Texas these days. Most of the contests are sponsored by the Texas Old-Time Fiddlers Association. One of the founders of that association has been playing the fiddle for 80 years. And if he's not off at a contest somewhere, you might find him at home playing the fiddle.
Play Gray Eagle.
Oh, Gray Eagle?
Yeah.
Been a good while since I played that.
Yeah.
Straley Allsup was born on April 4th, 1893. He calls Gustine home. Straley lived just across the street from his daughter, Vane Elms. They spend a lot of time together. They enjoy their meals together, and they make as many fiddle contests as they can. Straley's home is filled with trophies and plaques and ribbons. He won his first trophy in 1957. By the start of 1980, Straley had captured more than 5 dozen awards in fiddling contests all over this part of the country. Straley's mother had an old fiddle, and he learned from her how to play it. He started fiddling when he was 8 years old.
First time I was ever on the stage was in the old schoolhouse. I went to school about 4 miles down east of here. And the last day of school, I had to play that night, and somebody told them I could play a tune on the fiddle, and they got me in there, by gosh, and put a cane-bottom chair out there, and I had a wagon sheet for a curtain. And they set me down, I was 8 years old, and they put me down in that chair, and I played one tune and got up and took off. Boy, I left out of there right quick. Played one tune, Rye Whiskey, and still play it today. That's the old tune I played.
Straley doesn't need much of an excuse to pick up his fiddle, and he often invites his friend and guitarist Howard Westmoreland to play along. Howard is a Comanche County deputy sheriff.
I used to get on my stick horse moonshiny nights and ride up here to the drugstore, and I knew where they played music in there, and boy, I was interested in that doggone fiddling. I don't know one note from the other. I ordered me a book one time. I decided I'd want to learn by notes, you know, and learn to read music. And I got that thing, and I just opened it and looked at it, and I said, my goodness, that'd run me crazy to try to read that. Try to study that, so I just threw it away. I outgrew the stick horse. I got too big to ride a stick horse, so I went to riding horses, real horses, and I learned to ride bucking horses pretty good. And I farmed there until I hit a drought, and that burnt me out. I got disgusted, and I sold out to my brother and come to town. And I was building a yard fence out there. It was already there, but what I was doing was sawing the palings off. It was way up high, and they couldn't see my wife's yard. She had the prettiest yard in town. And so she wanted me to saw these palings half in two and nail them back on there, and that's what I was doing when I mashed my finger. And that made me some doggone mad. I threw that hammer just as far as I could send it, and I looked at her, and I said, Joe Bell, you know what I'm gonna do? No, what? What are you gonna do now? I said, I'm going to San Antonio and go to barber school and go in the barber business.
Straley Allsup was a barber for 50 years. He cut a lot of hair. But one day, a few years ago, he decided he'd had enough of that.
My eyes got to failing me and my hearing, and I decided I'd just quit. I'd been there long enough, so I sold out. And I told my daughter, I said, if you'll drive for me, we'll take that old fiddle. I believe I can beat the barber business all to pieces, and I have so far.
Straley and Vane will no doubt be off to another fiddler's contest soon. Some of the youngsters in the contest may not know they owe some thanks to Straley Allsup for the organization and professionalism in many fiddlers' contests. Straley was one of the founders of the Texas Old-Time Fiddlers Association. Straley Allsup's eyesight and hearing may not be as good as they used to be, but that doesn't keep him from playing the fiddle and making plans for the next Old-Time Fiddlers contest.
The Hallmark greeting card people have discovered in Fort Worth a photogenic church building the church members discovered earlier somewhere else.
The old Methodist church building was anything but photogenic back in 1974. It was standing then in the farm community of Buckner in Parker County. Buckner was not thriving, and the church building was being used as a hay barn. Episcopal priest Galen Poole discovered the building there. Father Poole had a congregation in Fort Worth, but the congregation had no church. Poole figured they could turn the old building into a suitable home for their congregation for about $700 and a little work.
I very carefully assured our modest congregation of about 50 people at that point, 50 to 100, that restoration would probably mean, $25,000 expenditure at the most. One man said it'll be at least 50. I was able several years later to tell him that he was quite wrong because it ended up being probably over $100,000. But the beautiful thing of all of that was that the congregation and people out of the community became interested in the project, and it indeed became not just our bicentennial project, but a community bicentennial project with folks from the former community coming in and assisting us, members from the Baptist, Roman Catholic, all sorts of people coming to our aid. We chose to build the building knowing that we had an existing debt of over $100,000 presently, and were able to build it by paying as we went. So a year later, when we were able to have the building on location, and that July the 4th, 1976, when we first opened, everything was paid for.
Father Poole has also become interested now in some other relics, like a pipe organ built probably in the 1860s in St. Louis, and an ancient baptismal fountain. The old church building has given Father Poole's congregation a new life. The membership has grown from 100 to more than 300, and strangers stop by at all hours now just to look at the building because of its storybook appearance. And the greetings card people have discovered Father Poole's church too. The Episcopal Church of Christ the King in Fort Worth is featured now on Hallmark greeting cards being sold all over the country.
Christ the King Episcopal Church holds services every Sunday, and there's someone there most of the rest of the time to show visitors around too. It's in southwest Fort Worth on Lackland Road. I'm Ray Miller, and I hope you'll be back with us at the same time next week to see some more of Texas.
Eyes of Texas travel guides for the Gulf Coast, East Texas, and the border area are now available from your bookstore or Cordovan Press, 5314 Bingo Road, Houston 77092.
The Eyes of Texas.